Millennials have dealt with change and survived through it and are very, very adaptable. We're entering into a new frontier, especially when you consider AI. Mm-hmm. When you look at just even now. I mean, I use different AI all the time as my main search engine. I don't use Google anymore. You use AI for your main search engine to kind of critique yourself and get better. The world is changing really fast, and millennials are really good at changing with it. And I think that's what we need in the next governor, somebody who can look at the world as it is and be able to adapt quickly. And I think that's the difference between maybe some of the older candidates in this field and someone like me.
Garrett Mason, thank you very much for being in studio with us. I think a great place to start is where we were just talking, family life in Maine. Obviously, usually it's the candidates who are late for the Robinson Report. So I'm embarrassed, but all I can say is, baby brain. This is the only place where I can complain about how tough pregnancy is for the men. Uh-huh. But you've had that ordeal as well.
Yeah.
Why did we make it in this state so difficult and expensive even to raise a family and start a family? It's something now that I'm experiencing it firsthand, now that it affects me, I feel like it's more important and I can complain about it.
Oh yeah, you can. And I think anybody can. Well, first, thank you for having me. I think what you guys are doing here on this show, everything you've done with the Maine Wire has been critically important in changing conversations. I think that's what media should be anyways. It should be about making people think about what's going on in the world around them, and you guys are doing that. So thank you. But yeah, I mean, I think so many of our problems in Maine, especially when it comes to family, are self-inflicted. I think, no matter what element of affordability you look at for a family, we have done things to make it harder. Whether it's housing, whether it's energy, your grocery bill, and some of these things are interconnected as well. Like one decision has made the other one worse as well. So, I mean, so much of it's self-inflicted. And I shared a clip on my social media earlier last week, and the Democrats in Maine own this economy.
Yes.
They own every piece of it. I mean, they have had carte blanche control of Augusta for 8 years. They've had the majorities in the House and Senate. They've had all the constitutional officers. They've had the governor's mansion. They've had every piece of the bureaucracy.
The administrative state, the judicial branch.
All of it, every piece of it. And anybody who's looking around and wondering why everything costs so much and why the culture is a place that's difficult to raise a child, you have one place to look, and it's the Maine Democrat Party. Because Republicans have been fighting this fight for a long time, and Democrats have used every tool in the book to try to stop any kind of decent reform or work towards collaboration on something maybe everybody could live with. So, I mean, my answer to your question, self-infliction is what has happened here. From 2010 to 2018, I started in the legislature, and I was young. I got to do it young, right? I mean, you and I came up through this together.
Yeah, I remember you came up as part of the Tea Party wave with Governor LePage, and it was like just as I was graduating from college and my first stint at the Maine Wire. Yeah.
Yep. Oh my gosh, that's crazy.
I know, it feels like we're old men.
We are old men. We are old men. But, from 2010 to 2018, we were making measurable progress on these things. The last income tax cut that was passed over a decade ago, and I was there when it happened. That was, something that we all worked towards very, very hard. Energy, right? We were trying to repeal the 100 megawatt cap. We were making plans towards, hopefully at this time in an alternate universe, we would have had lower energy costs. Like we were making so many good things happen from 2010 to 2018. And that progress all got stopped the second that Janet Mills and the Democrats retook control in 2018. So I think, as I look at this campaign and look at what we can do, we already started to do them. We just have to have the courage to move forward and accomplish that.
So you ran for governor in 2018, ranked choice primary. You were the runner-up to Sean Moody.
Yep.
Tell me, what does Maine look like if you had won that Republican primary?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think there's so many things that I would have done differently. Being governor is obviously it's very hard, and there's only 50 governors in America. It's a very hard thing to do, but I've kind of had the ability to sit back and watch as Janet Mills was faced with certain decisions and been like, what would I have done differently? And given the circumstances around me, the first time that I actually asked myself that question was when my wife asked it to me during COVID. And we were just talking, before we got rolling here about what was going on in my life at that time. My daughter was born a month into the COVID lockdowns.
Oh boy.
And so, we had a brand new baby daughter. We thought we were entering some sort of like post-apocalyptic world where, we wouldn't be let out of the house and, we had to store all our own food and all this. And my wife asked me one day, because I was watching TV and criticizing what was going on. She's like, well, you wanted this job. And if you were governor, what would you do? And I really had to take stock of myself and figure out like, what would I have done? And I did walk through some of those decisions. It's like, well, I know I certainly wouldn't have shut down the entire, business environment of the entire state of Maine. I certainly wouldn't have forced people to have vaccinations that they didn't want. It was like every decision they made was a decision made for the state.
An authoritarian
state. And as I walk through the things that Governor Mills did, well, I know that I wouldn't have expanded Medicaid to anybody who wanted it. I know I certainly wouldn't have done that. I remember the last budget that I voted on was around $6.9 billion. And here we are. The next governor is going to get handed a budget from the Mills administration at $13 billion or more. I know that I wouldn't have done that because I wouldn't have expanded the departments that were already completely bloated as it was. And so I've had the opportunity to sit back, knowing what we did, the positive things that we did, knowing how quickly Governor Mills and the Democrats turned it around, which makes it a lot easier for me, should I be lucky enough to win in November, to be able to go in and reverse all of those things. And that's the pitch that I'm making to Republican primary voters in this election. I'm not going to sit and be performative and try to tell you that I'm an outsider and I'm going to, disrupt this or I'm going to do this. Yeah, we can do all those things, but you wouldn't hire a plumber to work on your house who hadn't gone and got a journeyman's license or hadn't been in plumbing at all. You need experience. And I think what I can bring to the table in this election is I've run all my own businesses. My wife and I have a very successful construction company. I have my own public relations company. We do all of this work with whether you're in front of the government, or whether you need media training or any of these things. My company has been very successful. But I've also had the experience of actually sitting in the chair and making the decisions. And that is the blend that I think that we need in a Republican candidate this time. Sometimes you need a wrecking ball. I totally admit that. And sometimes you need somebody who can go in there and be a trauma surgeon and put it together really, really quickly. And I think that's what I can bring. I also think that voters are looking for honesty. They're looking for people to just say who I am, flaws and all, and be like, this is who I am. I'm not going to cosplay and be something that I'm not. And so that's what I want to bring to Maine people, an experience, steady hand with a proven track record of destroying some of the things in government that need to be destroyed. And that's the pitch I'm making to Republican voters. So.
You're carrying the millennial vanguard as well.
Yeah.
All the hopes and dreams of the millennial
are
right on your back.
Well, listen, I mean, I think there's an element of that needs to be realized, that just you and I are going through very similar periods of life right now. My daughter's a few years older than yours, your child will be. But I mean, I think millennials, we've had to face a very different set of circumstances than any other generation.
And that maybe gets to the generational divide in the candidate field, is that there are some of the candidates, though they are older, acknowledge that. Some of them I've noticed don't.
Yeah.
And I think it's a really important perspective, because if you're trying to reverse Maine's population decline, brain drain, if you're trying to bring talented labor to the state, you have to have that perspective.
For sure. I think millennials, think through what millennial people have gone through, right? So I graduated from high school in 2003. I'm 40 years old. I'm a couple months younger than the Vice President of the United States. You have millennials who, when I was in 11th grade, I remember they said, everybody go to the auditorium. There's something really big going on. And it was 9/11. You watch that. Your whole life you've been told you got to go to college. You go to college, you graduate with a degree, and the internet is kind of catching up alongside of you, right? You find out later in life that you've been replaced and your job's been exported to Malaysia or wherever, you name the place. Millennials have dealt with change and survived through it and are very, very adaptable. We're entering into a new frontier, especially when you consider AI. When you look at just even now. I mean, I use different AI all the time as my main search engine. I don't use Google anymore. You use AI for your main search engine to kind of critique yourself and get better. I look at it with education too. I have so many friends who their kids don't go to public school anymore because they're able to work from home. It might not even be a cultural or social issue what keeps them out of school. Like they can spend 3 months someplace else purely because of their job situation. The world is changing really fast, and millennials are really good at changing with it. And I think that's what we need in the next governor, somebody who can look at the world as it is and be able to adapt quickly. And I think that's the difference between maybe some of the older candidates in this field and someone like me.
You mentioned Medicaid expansion among the issues where you look at what Governor Mills has done and understand that you would have done something differently. At the candidate forum down in Old Orchard Beach a couple of weeks ago, there were at least one candidate on stage was talking about not reducing the eligibility guidelines for Medicaid, which, I mean, this is Paul LePage's Republican Party in some ways. He's like, the godfather when it comes to Medicaid, especially. I'll say the ideas around resisting Medicaid expansion and not putting able-bodied childless adults on Medicaid, not putting non-citizens on Medicaid, our biggest, most dysfunctional welfare program. This used to be like just understood as this is conservative policy, this is Republican policy. So I was shocked when I heard someone on the Republican debate stage talking about not fighting to reduce Obamacare, essentially, to get rid of Obama. All Obamacare was a huge expansion of the welfare state. And now we're seeing Medicaid expansion. What it actually looks like is all of these personal care service agencies. I mean, there's one across the street that's making $4 million a year. They're just printing money and with no accountability. So how, is Medicaid reform for you a priority? And what is the trauma surgeon approach to reforming that? Because once you establish this community of people who are getting money from the government for essentially just sending invoices to the Department of Health and Human Services, they're going to cry and wail, and they're going to tell you you're killing people and that people are going to die because you're slashing healthcare. You've seen, you saw under LePage for 8 years, they talked about what a meanie he was for refusing to expand Medicaid. What is the governor's approach to rolling back a government entitlement program, essentially taking away a lollipop? That's what you're really talking about.
So there's the actual way you do it through the law, and then there's also the emotional side of it as well. You have to face both of those things. In my experience, I've walked down the hallway with bureaucrats and government employees screaming at me as I walked into the Senate. That's its own thing, right? Like, you got to be able to withstand that kind of personal attack. I've had to walk out to my car during government shutdown and have people screaming at me as I walk to my car. I think for a lot of people who don't have the experience and the emotional side of that can be very jarring, and you can, that can make you waver on what you're going to do. So in my experience, that's the first thing that you have to understand how to do with. Luckily, I'm battle hardened with all of that stuff. So, that's the easy part. But the other part of it is you have to unwind some things. I think one of the things that frustrates me about some comments that I hear in our Republican field is we're just going to do X, Y, Z, and then it's going to be handled and it's going to be all over. And I think as Republicans, we believe that there's consequences for your actions and that sometimes it hurts. We're going to have to go through a little bit of a hurting period to unwind those things. Not necessarily the people who are benefiting from a rigged system, but it's going to take us time to undo these things. Medicaid expansion happened under a people's initiative, a citizens' initiative, and was passed by the people at the ballot box. You have to undo that law. You have to undo it. The only way that you can do that is by putting a repeal of that in the budget. I've talked about this on the campaign trail. The next governor is going to get handed a budget from Janet Mills. Whether it's me or whether it's another Democrat, they're going to get handed a budget from the administration of $13 billion plus saying, hey, this is our last budget. You want to know why? You know the answer to this. You have to start building a budget in September of the year before.
It's continuing services.
Yes.
This isn't policy. We're just continuing things.
We're just going to keep things the way that they are.
We're actually doing you a favor.
Right.
Yeah.
And that happened to Paul LePage. He got handed up the last Baldacci budget. And if you start thinking about that the day after the election, you've already lost. Yeah. You've already lost. And so the next Republican gubernatorial candidate has to start in August building out a budget, knowing where the bodies are buried, right? And the biggest one on Medicaid is you have to take out what happened under the law. You have to repeal that as part of the budget. It's your only chance if you don't have a Republican legislature. And you have to prepare for that. So you got to start during the campaign. You got to be governor while you're campaigning for the job at the same time. If you get there, the other thing that you have to contend with is that because of that expansion, we are dealing with virtually zero health insurance companies willing to do business in this state. Now, I have no sympathy for the health insurance companies, to be honest with you. I don't have a ton of sympathy for them. I think they've done a lot of this to themselves, and they champion some of the policies that are killing them.
Well, they've certainly benefited from Obamacare.
They certainly have.
Their stock prices have soared under Obamacare.
You look at the reverse hockey stick on that one graph. That they've done this to themselves, and they've caused great harm to Maine families and to American families. But that being said, you only have a certain number of insurers that are willing to cover anybody in Maine because we're covering a third of our state under Medicaid. So you have to do all of those things at the same time. We've talked about the childless adults. That's crazy. That's crazy. Like the fact that you can just be a person who doesn't have kids and that makes you eligible for Medicaid. That's wild.
Which is not just we're going to prevent you from going into bankruptcy if you get in a car accident or something. It's like personal care services,
right.
Unlimited, drug and alcohol treatment. There's this whole panoply of services that you get for free, and it takes away any of your incentives to reduce your healthcare utilization yourself through, right. Just taking good care of yourself, being healthy.
Yeah.
Not going to the emergency room every time you've got a headache or something. It distorts the high Medicaid enrollment rates distort our healthcare system in so many ways that can be hard for people to see.
Yeah.
But the clearest one is the able-bodied childless adults.
It's crazy.
We actually, we were talking about, starting a family in Maine. I sat down and did the math with the help of some AI tools. It would have been smarter for us to artificially self-impoverish through take deferred payment on our wages and rig it so we look like we're 400% below the federal poverty line, go on Medicaid, do all of pregnancy expenses through Medicaid for totally free.
Yep.
And then, make it up in the afterwards.
Yep. No.
You could start a company that actually did that.
You could.
That'd be the cheapest way to have a child and start a family in the state of Maine, because that's how nice the Medicaid system is. That's the setup that we give for people who came across the border 9 months ago from Burundi and decide that they want to start a family in South Portland or Lewiston. But for families that have been here for 9 generations and mom and dad both work, they're going to pay like $30,000, $40,000 just to have one child.
Yep. Well, you bring up a really good point, because let's talk about Obamacare versus someone without Obamacare, right? I'm very fortunate. Like, my wife and I do very well for ourselves. Like, we've worked very hard for the businesses that we own. But, you have to have some sort of coverage, right? You got to have something over your head saying, like, if somebody gets hurt or gets a terminal diagnosis or an unfortunate diagnosis, that, you got something there to cover you. So we don't qualify for an Obamacare subsidy. I own my own business. My health insurance premium every month for me, my wife, and my daughter is $1,600 a month. Okay. It sucks, but that's the price. We pay it. My deductible is $12,000 a year.
You don't effectively have health insurance.
You don't have health insurance.
And, unless you're consuming what your deductible is.
That's right.
You don't have health insurance.
And it's $32,000 a year. $32,000 a year is what I have to shell out before I get any kind of coverage. Now, you also can't get a doctor, right?
Yeah.
Like, there's no primary care physicians. I have a great PCP. He's wonderful. He's part of a direct primary care model, right? You pay the subscription. So I have to pay on top of that to have access to my doctor. Democrats love to talk about how, we got to make sure that everybody has a doctor and all this stuff. And healthcare is a human right, Steve. Mm-hmm. Don't you know that?
Yeah,
healthcare is a human right. That means you have the ability to take something from somebody that's not yours. You have the ability to go in and force a doctor to care for you.
Yeah.
Without
good luck with that.
Yeah, good luck with that.
That's why the doctors are in Florida.
My doctor said exactly. My doctor, I asked him, like, what's the solution here? Like, what do you do? He said, Garrett, he goes, these people are already rationing care. The policies that they're doing are already rationing care. He's been in practice for over 20 years, independent of any system. He's been in practice for 20 years. Do you know how many interns he's had come through his office that want to go into primary care? 1 this year. And he doesn't think he's actually going to go into it. And it's because we are forcing these people to the brink. We are literally draining them as PCPs. They have no time to give any meaningful care to anyone. And it's a direct result of the policies that we've put in place of saying something like healthcare is a human right. You say that to people and you don't understand what you're saying to the doctor. And we're going to cover everything. We have so put the pressure on people like him that they're just leaving, man. They're just leaving. They're going to other places. They're going to direct primary care where you have to pay a premium just to see them. They're finding ways out to protect themselves, their own mental health, and be able to actually do what they went to school for and actually care for people. That's some of the unintended consequences of what we have done. The other thing, and this is just worldview on display, you go up to the State House and all the Democrats want to talk about is universal health care.
Yeah.
That's all they want to talk about. And any kind of reform that moves us towards more options is immediately defeated under all circumstances.
They don't want competition or quality. They want equality.
That's right.
They just want everybody locked into the same shitty system.
That's right. That's right. Let me give you an example of something that one of my clients fought for really hard. So I do work for the Maine Farm Bureau. And we had a bill that would have allowed Farm Bureau health plans into the state of Maine. All right. It's not health insurance. We've never claimed that it was health insurance. But this is something that actually used to be available in the state of Maine through the New York Farm Bureau that farmers loved. They loved it. It was super cheap. It didn't cover things like, your yearly doctor's visit or, any of the normal stuff that you just have to do for being alive.
Mm-hmm.
But if you got hurt, if you got cancer, if
You got lymphoma
Yeah.
from the glyphosate
From the glyphosate, right.
that you were spraying on your corn.
you were covered.
Yeah.
You're covered for, with no caps. And there was a farmer in North Dakota that I used to use for an example. They implemented this a few years ago in North Dakota. And a family of 7, they saved $30,000 a year on their premiums.
Which is crazy. It's
It's
more
crazy.
than the median income.
That's right.
For a single adult here in the state.
Well, especially when you think about the fact that the average Maine farmer makes around $20,000 a year.
Yeah.
And most farmers, a spouse has to work off farm to get health insurance and, all of that stuff. But that reform, which farmers are clamoring for and want back, something that they had that was taken away from them because of the ACA, Democrats opposed it vehemently because it was an option. Because you see, what's happening right now is by design. Limiting healthcare options and all that, that's all in design to be a universal healthcare system. So you end up with the only choice being that. So, you ask what kind of reforms can you do when you're governor? Well, that's a bill that you can go after to give somebody an option. Roll back some of the entitlements that people are getting in some of these, items. But you have to be able to do that way before you walk in. And I think that's what my experience gives me, is the ability to look down the road and see what the timeline of the legislature is, see what the timeline of the Constitution is, and understand that the next governor has to be ready to go way before day one. And I believe I can bring that to people.
On Medicaid, would you do anything on the provider side? One of the things, I guess the nuclear bomb of fixing Medicaid is to disenroll all the providers. Is what we've seen looking at the data is huge provider bloat.
Yeah.
We've got just hundreds of new medical providers that have been created over the last 5 years. Legit Quality Care LLC, Super Best Premium Care LLC.
Yeah.
I mean, you just look through the list of providers and you're like fake, and they're all in the same office building in Portland. The governor can unplug the funding to those.
Yeah.
Pretty unilaterally.
Yep.
You can work with the federal government to shut off the funding, like across the board. You do not have to have an audit finding or a criminal investigation or a criminal finding. The governor has pretty broad authority to stop payment to any of these organizations that are sketchy. So I wonder if there's a Medicaid unwind strategy that can be deployed on the provider side.
Yeah.
I know we have a view of Medicaid fraud in the state of, or welfare fraud in the state of the person who's just taking advantage of the system, but there's also the business or the provider that's taking advantage of the system. And that, by dollar amount, hundreds, thousands times bigger than what just an individual scammer is getting away with.
Mm-hmm. No, I think that you absolutely can do that. I mean, so many of the Medicaid and Medicare rules are dictated from the federal government. And just like you're seeing the president turn off the tap to a lot of these things, governors have those same tools available to them. And I think what the difference is between someone like me and maybe somebody else in the field is I understand those tools. You can make everybody reapply. You can make everybody, you can audit all of these things. And we have entire people, like there's positions as departments built into the Department of Health and Human Services to root these things out. The problem is they're just not being used. And it's easier to ignore what's going on. And I think Democrats especially are okay with having a built-in, like, well, it's this much that's probably fraud, when we really know it's much, much more than that. So yeah, I mean, I think that's a fabulous idea. It's like, shut the tap off and like, let's build out from there. And that's why it's almost like a zero-based budgeting, except like zero-based fraud approach.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. Let's.
You know?
I think of just having like a panel of people, and you've got to come in and just like explain to us that your business is real. You know, like let's have a conversation about what kind of health care you provide. We can see that you were billing, you know, $2,000 in 2020. Now you're billing $5 million. What are Mainers getting for that service?
I have elected members of the legislature who are doing that. You know, who are, as you well know. But the other thing too is like just
Representative Yusuf comes to mind. By the way,
I wasn't going to say.
He's got he's got a thriving personal care services industry.
Yeah, I know.
And his wife works for a separate personal. His wife actually works for legit home care.
Why? Yeah, that when you first said that, when I first started hearing you say that, I thought you were like making fun of it.
No,
I'm like, it's like a real name. It's like
legit home care. Yeah, and, which by the way, audited by the Mills administration, found to have received improper payments and swept under the rug. They continue billing.
Well, and it's enforcement too, right? It's like you have to have the willingness to actually go and do that. And Janet Mills knows that. Janet Mills was a prosecutor.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, she's a prosecutor. She's a district attorney in Androscoggin County, where I'm a county commissioner now. It's not like she doesn't know how to do this. She does. It's willfully being ignored because it's a constituency of the Democrat Party that's doing this. So, I mean, that's the facts. But this goes to another place where I think that my experience can help understand how to do something like that. I hear a lot of candidates talk about Doge. Wonderful. Like, let's do it, right? But we have an entire department of state government. It's not a constitutional office. It's like a quasi-constitutional office called the state auditor. And part of what their job is to go through and audit everything. That's supposed to be an ongoing standard thing. That person, whether we like it or not, is elected by the state legislature. And for me, what I would like to see is I would like to get, 94 members of the legislature who would be willing to elect a state auditor who actually might have a CPA license. You know,
that'd be new. That'd be novel.
Like when they get into office, they actually have that.
Yeah.
And that's, for me, is something that would be a priority if I am the candidate. And it was a priority when I was in the legislature, of getting constitutional officers elected, because you can rant, scream, and rave about how you're gonna prosecute fraud and you're gonna do all this stuff. But in Maine, the governor doesn't have that power. The attorney general does. And you have to, if your department's making all these referrals to the attorney general's office on these items, and you have an attorney general that's Aaron Fry, well, good luck.
Yeah.
Good luck.
Yeah.
And so
we saw that with Gateway, by the way.
We did. That's right.
Gateway has, been flagged 3 times. Gateway Community Services flagged 3 times by the auditors at the Department of Health and Human Services. A whistleblower complaint filed with the state auditor, referred to the attorney general, and Aaron Fry says no, and instead gives them $400,000 in opioid settlement money. Yes.
And listen, Paul LePage dealt with this all the time when he was governor. He had an attorney general for one term.
Yeah.
He had Bill Snyder as his attorney general. It wasn't his, the legislature's attorney general.
An attorney general that was aligned with him. They shared a vision rather than trying to undermine him.
Right. And then he had Janet Mills, for the rest of the time. And so, he had to deal with that. And what did he have to do? He had to go hire his own lawyers to then try to get the attorney general to represent the state on various matters that were happening at that time. So much of what we do in this next election is dependent on, can we elect not only a governor, but a legislature that's willing to do this. I remember one thing that we did. It was very fun political play. We were successful in getting a member of the constitutional officers elected when I was there, by convincing a few Democrats to vote with us. We put the Republican candidate for treasurer was Terry Hayes, who's a former Democrat member of leadership. She then became an independent. And Republicans got together and said, hey, we might not be able to get our person in there, but we could probably get her.
Yeah.
And we made some good reforms in the treasurer's office because she was there, despite not being a Republican. you need somebody who can go in there and like maybe try to find somebody who might not be with you all the way if you don't have the majorities in the legislature. So those constitutional officer positions are really, really important. And
as we found, by the way, with the Secretary of State, the Attorney General and the Secretary of State, we found in both cases that the Republicans would be much better off just insisting on a compromise candidate who has integrity, isn't ideologically aligned on everything, but just has integrity and isn't, totally corrupt. Republicans would be way better off.
Way better off. And you have to be able to pursue those kind of things at the right time. And you only get one chance to elect a Secretary of State every 2 years, Attorney General, a State Treasurer. You only have one opportunity, and you have to be ready to put somebody forward based on what you ended up with in the election. And so that's something that I'll be really focused on when we get in there. I mean, you look at the Secretary of State's office right now. I mean, I don't think we really know what happened with the ballots yet.
Oh, we don't. I don't. I mean, well,
I mean, we're never going to know. Let's just be honest about it. But
there may be some people who know.
Yeah.
There may be people in the Secretary of State's office who know exactly what happened, but she claims that there's an investigation happening under her office, but her detectives didn't interview anyone other than the woman who received the ballots.
Yeah.
Didn't interview the clerk, didn't interview anyone at UPS as far as we know. Then she claimed it was the FBI. The FBI never interviewed anyone. Now she claims the Attorney General has the investigation. As far as we know, there's been no update from the Attorney General. And then there was this D.C. area firm that somehow ended up with affidavit ballots.
Yes.
She won't tell us who that firm is.
Yeah.
She's refused to tell the Republican lawmakers who have asked. Yep. We have a Freedom of Access Act request in that she's stonewalling.
And the legislators on the Veterans and Legal Affairs Committee actually wrote a letter to her about that as well.
It's weird.
Isn't that strange?
She knows all these details about it. She can't come up with the name of the D.C. area firm that received Maine absentee ballots.
Yeah.
But we've got the gold standard in elections.
Yes. No, it's. I don't think people realize how important, you want to solve fraud, right? Like, I think Republicans have a specific series of issues we want to talk about. Like, fraud is obviously a big one. It is a huge issue. You have done a wonderful job uncovering that. I remember when I was in the legislature, we used to talk about fraud all the time, and people thought we were crazy until we started uncovering that, people were selling their ABT cards at pawn shops, and all of these type of things that Maine housing, some of the fraudulent things that were happening. That was a long time ago.
Yeah. Well, I remember because that was one of the first big Freedom of Access Act requests I got was the EBT card metadata.
Yep.
And it's an Excel spreadsheet.
Virgin Islands, Disney World.
Yeah.
Remember that?
Like casinos and smoke shops and strip clubs and stuff. Yep. People are using their EBT cards there. All 50 states.
Out of state.
Yeah, all 50 states.
And other territories. Yeah. The one that always stuck in my head, man, that was, we are
old.
We are old, right?
We are old, but the Virgin Islands. I remember when that was big money.
Cash withdrawals from ATMs in the Virgin Islands with Maine EBT cards. That one stuck with me for some reason. But no, I mean, all of these things that Republicans want to go after, right, are like, fraud. We hate fraud. It's anathema to who we are as a party, is like we want responsible use of money. Well, if you want to go after that, you really need to have an attorney general and an auditor who will help you with those things. It makes it much easier than just independent legislators like trying to get answers, as we just discussed, from government departments. If you want to have clean elections, not clean elections, but clean elections,
yes,
you have to have a Secretary of State who's willing to work with you, or just be honest, like just an honest broker in that process. And so many of these things run through places that you have to win everything in order to make actual change. And that's why I think the experience that I have, if we don't have those positions, I can be very effective in knowing where to go to get the result we want, despite not having those things.
It's funny you bring up the state auditor, because today is the plea hearing for Gerald Merrill, who was the head of the Charleston Correctional Facility, who was caught by the state auditor, embezzling. All they've said is more than $10,000, but I have good reason to believe that it's going to be an eye-watering amount of money that he embezzled when it comes out today during his hearing. I don't know if he's going to accept the plea or not, but that was one example, a particularly egregious example of a government employee embezzling money. But a lot of what we see is totally legal on the Medicaid system. Like, coming here from another country, claiming asylum, starting a personal care services agency, and enrolling all of your cousins as employees and patients of your agency, and then sending bills to the taxpayer of Maine. It's totally legal.
Yeah.
So I think that there have to be creative ways to address that in terms of re-enrolling or disenrolling the providers, but also what you mentioned with the budget, coming up with an understanding of the budget that makes it harder for those kinds of legal fraud schemes. Legal fraud is what I consider it. But part of this gets to how ruthless the Democrats and the Governor Mills have been with budgets over the last 6 years.
Oh my gosh.
Like, we've seen majority budgets, and for people who are not like familiar with the legislature, they don't understand, like, there was a way that politics in Maine operated for 30 years, and then Governor Mills came in, and we had a much more ruthless, majority budget, partisan budget. And there's a vein of the Republicans who think, well, we're just going to win and then go back to doing supermajority budgets. Like, we're going to do things the nice, decent way that they were doing them back, under Governor Baldacci or Angus King. What is your view on that? Are we majority budgets going forward? Is it time to reverse this, or is this like, we're going to take over and then play nice and show the other side what it means to be decent and play nice?
So this is where I think that my experience gives me a lot more insight, and I've been inoculated against that thought process. Because I think if you rewound to Garrett Mason of 2010, I would have agreed with that. I would have said, nope, we need to work with everybody. We're going to do supermajority budgets and whatever. Just a brief primer on that. Up until 2019, the way that budgets worked in the Maine legislature is you negotiated for the entire first session with both parties, and you got a budget that was voted on by at least 2/3 in the Senate and 2/3 in the House. Now, I think that that's what kept, looking back, it's crazy that I'm even going to say this, but I think that's what kept our budgets under control for such a long time, is because Democrats couldn't fund everything that they wanted, and Republicans were part of the process. Because let's just be honest, Republicans for the past 50 years, we haven't had control very often.
No,
right?
No. And even when Governor LePage was in office, I mean, there was two years of the Republican legislature, but always kind of butting heads with Democratic lawmakers, or the administrative state would come up with, oh, you can't do this. Like, there's this administrative reason why the bureaucracy has more power than the governor and the legislature.
Yeah. Well, and I was there from 2010 to 2012 when we had that majority. I was part of that majority, and we did amazing things, as we talked about earlier in this podcast. We did incredible things. However, we were all new. Governor LePage just showed up to the State House from the Waterville City Hall, and a guy like me, I was 25 years old. I wasn't supposed to win that election. I wasn't supposed to be a senator, and I found myself there.
It was like 18-year incumbent?
Yeah. 18-year incumbent. I took him out with 11% of the vote. Just hard work.
You came into the legislature in the 2010 Tea Party wave. You guys were all new. You're 25 years old. What did that experience teach you of having Republican control, about how power should be wielded when you do control a branch of government? Versus what you've seen under the Democrats with the majority budgets? Because in some ways you have to admire just how ruthless the governor and the lawmakers have been at implementing their agenda.
Yep, I do admire it, and like I said, I think were I to rewind to 2010, I probably would have shared a lot of those things that Republicans did at that time. Like, we need to work together, we need to get this done, whatever. In the past 8 years, they have not just crossed the Rubicon, but like destroyed the bridge over it. The Democrats have. In 2010, when we had the ability to do that, we didn't do it because we wanted to work with everybody. that was a huge missed opportunity. There were some things we should have done that would have been passed in a simple majority budget that I think would have made Maine better in regards to energy, in regards to things in the budget like cost controls, some of the Medicare stuff that we were dealing with at the time, which, talking about ATMs in other states that, cash withdrawals from Maine EBT cards. But it just wasn't the culture of the legislature at that time to do that. I always tell this funny story, but I remember the day after the 2010 election, we got a call. I was out picking up signs with my cousin Dale Crafts, and still couldn't believe that I had won. We got a call saying, "Hey, everybody's going to the State House. We're going to introduce the new Republican majority in a press conference." Right? So we all get up there. I hadn't been in there since I was in high school for like a school field trip. And I walk into the Hall of Flags, and I'm looking around, and there's all these, I was hugging people I'd never even seen before, probably hadn't seen since, just people who had been waiting for this day for Republicans to have their shot, right? And I remember looking up and down the stairs in the Hall of Flags, and there was people, I would say scores, like 40 people maybe, that were walking up and down the stairs looking down, and they were crying and like consoling each other. And I leaned over to Dale and I said, "Dale," I said, "these people are so happy that we're here." And there's a clip of him you can hear laughing during Josh Tardy, his speech. And he looks at me, he goes, "Garrett," he said, "these people are not happy. They're all Democrats and they're going to lose their job," Yeah. And I look at that and I laugh now, but you know what? We didn't do a good enough job of purging the bureaucracy because they waited us out.
Yes.
And many of them are still there today. And that's the experience that I can bring. I'll never let that happen again. Never. Like, there are people in the bureaucracy in the state that are there to wait you out and preserve the system. That will not happen. It cannot happen with me because I had 8 years of watching it, and you can't let it survive.
So how do you get rid of them? Do we rubber room them? I think the state union protections are so entrenched and strong. Like, they've planned for these contingencies. They've planned for losing an election and having a Republican come along. They're like ticks.
Yes. Except
for they've got bodyguards.
Yes. There is some tools that we have at our disposal now that we didn't have back then. In 2017, the Supreme Court decided the Janus decision. And what that said is that nationwide, public sector unions, you have right to work, no matter what state you're in.
And they've declined enrollment ever since.
They have.
I think they're just over 6,000 executive branch union members at this point.
They have.
So if you're providing a valuable product, typically your customer base doesn't decline year over year.
So, one of the things that I would do is make sure that everybody knows that they have the option to leave the union. They don't have to sit through and donate money every month to an organization that's going to promote only Democrats. And they can say, "Oh, it's a separate fund. They voluntarily contribute to that." You and I both know that is not true. So I think that's a tool that's in place that, as governor, I would actively make sure that people knew that. And I think it would be better for them as employees. I think it would be better for the state as a whole. I think public sector unions, where they have an active incentive to grow government, is not something that's on the side of the taxpayer.
No, it's a conspiracy against the taxpayer.
It very much is. And so the Janus decision, I think, opened up a lot of doors that a lot of governors don't understand. I understand that. And I would actively make sure that we work that.
Do you think buyouts are an option? I know the Doge, when Doge came in, they just looked at a bunch of these government officials and said, it's going to be cheaper just to pay you to go away. And I think there's some. Yeah, it did. And I think that there are probably some instances where some of these higher level officials would probably take the money and run.
I think they would, because their pension's in place. And they can go someplace else, which pensions are a whole other subject matter. But I got to watch as those people insulated themselves and, like you said, like a tick, like burrowed themselves in to protect themselves. And, getting them out is paramount to making sure that government functions correctly. But back to, what you were saying about the budget. The Democrats have made sure that in every cycle, there hasn't been any Republican votes for any of the budgets that Janet Mills has passed. None. They pass it by the end of March so that they can put it into law without any Republican support. So it should be no surprise to anybody why we've seen the budget go from around $7 billion to now where it is, north of 12.5. So would I, as governor, pursue a majority budget if I had a Republican majority? You better believe it. 100%. It's the only way to get it done, to make the reversals that have to be made in order to bring government back under control. Because if you stick around and you wait for Democrats to join you on a 2/3 budget, you're going to keep it status quo. That's where it's going to be. So this election is very, very important to make sure that we have a Republican majority that can make some snap changes. And I'm the only one in the field that's been through that. I'm the only one that's been able to say, all right, we have a majority. Now what do we do with it? And I'm going to partner with the legislature to get those things done. But I also know how, as an executive, you can make pretty fast change if you know what you're doing. But we have to play different ball. We can't just say, oh well, they didn't do that with us. Let's operate on a little bit higher level. We're way beyond that now.
So I cringe sometimes covering the legislature and watching some of the Republican lawmakers give speeches. They still seem to be under the illusion that a good quality speech in the Maine House or the Maine Senate is going to change the other side's mind. If you could just persuade them and give a Lincoln-esque piece of oratory, suddenly they're going to be like, you know what? Yes, we should vote in favor of that Charlie Kirk resolution, we should support. Yeah. We don't need to tax people through their energy bills to support solar panels made in a foreign country. Like that, you're right. I've seen the light of day. There are Republicans who believe that, which maybe we're cynical, having grown up as millennials, but it's like we don't have time for Republican lawmakers who think like that and don't understand what they're up against.
Right. Well, listen. So when I first started in the legislature, there was a lot of speeches like that, right, where it changed somebody's mind. But guess whose mind it changed?
The Republicans. Yeah, that's why they think so. That's why they think it works.
It changed Republicans' mind because Republicans tend to be free thinkers. They tend to take in and absorb information and spit out their own results, right? That tends to be the way that it works. The Democrats don't operate that way. There's a story, and I will leave the names out. I remember in the budget, the first budget we passed in 2011 as a Republican majority, we had to drag some Democrats with us to get that done. And one of the things they wanted there was some workers' comp reform. There's a few other things that were happening in that budget that they wanted, which were not insurmountable things for Republicans to get on board with. And I remember there was 3 Democrat legislators who had gotten beaten up so bad that they couldn't even go to their own caucus. And they ended up coming into our caucus for one, just to see if we could find a deal, right? They ended up joining our caucus just for one night. You would not believe what the Democrats do to their members behind closed doors. You would not believe it. It is no holds barred, brutal lobbying behind closed doors.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard stories of Democratic lawmakers leaving caucus crying, casting committee votes, being brought into a corner caucus and harangued, and then they come back out crying and reverse their vote.
Yep.
Little permission slips that they sign during caucus indicating they're going to vote one way or the other. But you or I look at that, the conservative disposition is like, bleep off, majority leader. Like you think that you.
When I was majority leader, people said that to me.
Yes, of course. Yeah, right. But it's just it's anathema to the conservative disposition. But also, it's what makes them so effective
Right.
at passing a lot of these things that end up being unpopular and terribly dysfunctional. Like, the idea that we're going to subsidize solar panels by increasing every grandma's electricity rates
Yes.
through this weird, program that like benefits it's corrupt it's cronyism is what it is. But they get that done, and then they still manage to protect it. And Democrats walk in line with a lot of these policies that are like anti-poor people, but they've got them whipped.
Yeah. 100%.
Whipped right into line.
Yeah.
But the Republicans don't seem to be able to have an effective minority through the way they manage their whip count.
But
is it just a disposition thing, or is it a leadership thing?
I think it's partly that. I think the other thing I would say as well, given my job and what I do, I'm in the State House a lot, and I've been able to watch as the attitude of Republicans has changed. I do believe that Republicans understand after 8 years of what the Democrats have done to Republicans, they have started to stand up together and say, no, we're going to wield the tools that we have. And one of the things that I'm proud of right now, and I hope that this sticks, Republicans are asserting some of their authority on the two-thirds votes that under the Constitution they're required to make. So like on bonds and on things like that, they're standing up and saying, you guys ran roughshod over us all year long. You're not getting your pet project bonds. And they've been really, really firm on the things that they can say no to. But I think, going back to my own experience is you need a governor in this next legislature when you're going to change tax like that. You need a governor who's able to use the soft power of the bully pulpit to bring members in and say, I know that you think that you can convince somebody with a really nice speech. I understand that and I respect it, but I'm going to tell you why you're wrong, and can explain to new members especially that was lost a long time ago. And now we have to get some things done, and the only way we can do that is if we have us all together. Let's work our battles out in the back room and come out with a united front. And as governor, I can do that. I've had to do it. As majority leader, I had to do those things. So we're in a different environment in Augusta right now. It's not, the 125th legislature 2010. We got to make some big changes real fast.
Everywhere I go in the state, people are contemplating an exit plan. Things have gotten so bad in Maine. Bangor is spiraling. Portland is maybe laying on rock bottom. I don't know if it's like ready to get up. Lewiston, kind of the same thing. But across the state, we're 44% down from replacement birth rate. Mm-hmm. Something like 32 or 33 babies are born every day in Maine, which is crazy for a state of 1.4 million people. It's not sustainable. But a lot of people are looking at this next election as, well, I've stuck it out in Maine through COVID, through all this stuff because I like the state, it's where my family is. But increasingly, people are ready to pull the ejection seat and just go to Tennessee, Florida, New Hampshire, literally any other state where there's a little bit more economic prosperity and not just total insanity in the public schools, in the cities. Do you think that is a factor for the coalition of Republicans that the next governor would come into office with? Mm-hmm. And do you think it will give some urgency behind what we were talking about with majority budgets or being a little ruthless when it comes to Medicaid? Mm-hmm. Is there a broad awareness? Do you think that they understand that?
Yeah, I do. I think that a lot of the Republicans that I talk to in the legislature and people that, this is actually even more interesting, is people who used to serve or who've been civically minded that are coming back and saying, oh yeah, we got to fix this now because if we don't, I'm not going to be able to stay, or my kid's thinking about leaving. I'm not going to be able to see my grandkids anymore because they're going to go someplace else. Listen, there's no secret. This is not a secret. Maine's a hard place to live, just environmentally, right? Like my wife's from California and she grew up in the valley. And so, a winter is rough. She had to learn how to be in the winter, mm-hmm. right? And So naturally, there's just an environmental factor that like just not everybody's willing to deal with. We have so much going for us that is going underutilized. I mean, we have one of the most forested states in the entire country, but we don't use our forestry system. Like we have, people don't look at it this way, but we have a border with Canada where essentially anything that we could do with them, we get a 70% discount, a 30% discount just because of the exchange rate. Like we are closer to Europe than any other state. We're closer to Africa than any other state. There's the Arctic trade routes. Like we have so many things going for Maine, but we actively make sure that we don't utilize them under the policies that the Democrats have pursued for the better part of the last decade. I do believe that we are at a point in our state where there's going to start being mass exodus of people if we don't show them why Maine is the way that life should be. And it's more than just being able to go to a hike or go to the beach. We have to prove to people that you can live here, you can thrive here. You don't just have to survive here, because there was a time that was the case. And so much of that comes from the policies that we pursue here in Augusta. And I believe that because of my experience and the way that, and the unique set of life experiences that I've gotten to have, I can do that. I'm living it, man. Like I'm 40 years old. I got a 6-year-old daughter, married. I live in the house that I grew up in, which I don't think is that different from a lot of people here in Maine. I think that the scenario that I'm going through is very, very much the same. But yes, I believe that we are losing those things. And we got to bring them back. I do think that Republicans are ready to play a little bit more ruthless game when it comes to getting the things that we want. And what we need is a governor. We need a guy at the top who can go in there and be like, I know the past 16 years of history that we have here. I know how to get it done because I've done it. And we all need to get on the same page and change this place, because if we don't, we are already in a population death spiral. You just said it. We're already headed in that direction. The average age of a Mainer is 44.8 years old. It's older than both of us. Mm-hmm. That's not sustainable. But all that being said, we have so much going for us. We just have to have a governor who realizes that.
We've been talking off camera a little bit about AI and the different ways that different industries are using it, how it's going to affect society. There seems to be there's really two camps amongst those who are paying attention to it. The biggest camp, I would say, is people who think that ChatGPT is just like a fancy search engine. Yeah, right. Maybe they used it early on to make like funny pictures or something, funny images, or they're still using it as a search engine. And then there's people who kind of understand the potential of the technology, or can at least glimpse it. And there's a little bit of doomerism going on, but there's also some, innovation, some looking at, how it will transform the economy. I don't know which of those camps I'm in. I'm still paying close attention to it, and I can see how transformative it's going to be, not over the next year, but over the next 7 to 8 months. Mm-hmm. Already there are businesses that will come out, and the next day they're totally obviated by an AI product that comes out and is released free, open source, that they built by prompting Claude AI. Mm-hmm. The state government has come out and said no AI. Mm-hmm. In classic, political Augusta fashion. No government office can use AI, and we're going to form a blue ribbon commission, and we're going to figure out what to do with AI. Yeah. When I take a 10 gigabyte Medicaid data file and can drop it into AI and find the businesses in this state that are billing 5 to 10 times the national average for a given service in Medicaid, I'm thinking, well, wouldn't it be nice if the fraud office
did that
at HHS had that right. in real time, and the first month that some company submits totally fraudulent billing, they could just come out and say, geez, hey, you popped some red flags for us here because you're 10 times as expensive as everyone else doing this. So what's going on? Yeah. And then you save taxpayers $4 million over the next 5 years. Right. There's going to be all kinds of instances like that, but just generally for society, it's going to be transformative. How have you thought about artificial intelligence and large language models, what they mean for the future of the state of Maine, and what they mean for governance in Maine.
Yeah. I mean, so when the government put out, the state government put out that you couldn't use AI on anything anymore, that's when I knew that they had lost the plot. They didn't understand that it's so beyond that you just can't even say that. It's not even realistic. There's people using AI tools on, watching government, meetings, like committee meetings, all these things. There's people using AI tools on all of the things that they're doing, and they're just going to stick their heads in the sand and say, we're not, but you can't use it here at work.
But
what foolishness.
Have they lost the plot, though, or do they know that the threat to government jobs?
Oh, well, I think,
there's got to be at least, that was my debate.
I mean,
I was like, man, they're so good at protecting, protecting the job. Don't kill the job, the union motto.
But this is one of those things that the wave is too high to avoid.
Yeah.
It's, you can say that, but I mean, you are trying to protect yourself. But I mean, the bottom line is you can't. This is too transformative. This is like printing press, steam engine type changes in the economy. So you have to figure out how to use it for your own designs, and in the government's case, for the betterment of the people, right? To save money, make things more efficient, provide better services. And so, they said, well, we're going to do a blue ribbon commission, and they come out with a report of all these things that they're going to do to like make sure that AI is safe. Well, let's just be honest. The little state of Maine is not going to be able to stem the tide of AI.
I mean, we're fighting climate change too. How are we supposed to? Aaron Fry's taking on ExxonMobil. We're fighting climate change. We're solving all poverty in Africa.
And we got rid of all PFAS.
Yes,
we got rid of all PFAS.
Yeah, we've got so many battles we're fighting. Why shouldn't we take on fighting artificial intelligence?
Yeah, it's So I mean, that was when I was like, man, what a bad approach this is. But I mean, you have segments of the economy that are being completely either eliminated or transformed through AI. I know in my own personal business, we've been able to cut costs. In my wife's business of building homes, because you can run a floor plan through AI, through different tools in AI, and say, oh, I can, you can save 20% if you, do this kind of window, or if you buy this type of, flooring or whatever. And it's almost immediate. It's almost immediate, especially with housing and like figuring out what kind of inventory you need. We have to be figuring out how we can utilize these tools in government. I think you've already figured out how to do some of those things, to be honest. But it's coming, and we have to figure out how to use it better. I know the pulp and paper industry has seen advent in AI and the type of wood that's being selected to be harvested, like what kind of processing they're doing. I went to in 2018. This was happening. It wasn't AI, but like what they're able to do with wood right now to find the best piece of it using that type of technology. I mean, you're eliminating jobs. So you have these huge, complex problems that you're trying to balance workforce, and you're trying to balance the future. And you have to have somebody who's living those things. And I mean, I live them every day, even in our public affairs business. I mean, you can sit there and watch a committee hearing and not really have to watch it. You can have, a bot watch it for you and get a full-blown summary. There's people who that's their entire job at the State House. It's their entire job. So we're entering into this huge time, and we can't bury our heads in the sand. We have to approach it full on, or we're going to get left behind.
I also think that thanks to the large language models, there will be no excuse for any lawmaker to say, well, it was buried in the 300-page special appropriations bill that came out at 3 a.m. It's like, no, you can understand these massive amounts of data. It's harder to hide in complexity. Like, that's what I think the advantage for conservatives is in large language models is the fourth branch of government, the administrative state in Augusta, has become very good at hiding things and protecting things through complexity.
Yes.
Oh, you haven't worked at the Department of Health and Human Services for 25 years. You just don't understand. You just don't understand, or you weren't there at the special appropriations table when we were striking the deal at 3 o'clock in the morning. It's these large language models allow conservatives to fight an asymmetric battle against this huge class of people who have grown up in state government and who benefit from state government growing and propagating these new programs and new blue ribbon commissions. I think is a powerful tool. And to be able to understand how that's changing the way everything operates, the way information flows, the way people consume information, be a powerful advantage for conservatives.
Well, you also have to be knowledgeable enough to ask the right questions. It's only as good as the input that you give it. And that's one of the things that I want to make sure that we're doing. It's like, as conservatives, are we asking the right questions of the technology, and are we applying it in the right places? I watched that new Chris Pratt movie, Mercy.
Yes. Yeah.
Terrifying.
Yeah.
But just as a quick summary, it's an AI court that it's virtual certainty that you did this murder. You're going to get executed if you can't prove yourself in an hour and a half.
Yeah.
And what I learned from that movie was it's all about input. It's all about input. And it's like, AI will never be human. There's a human component to life that I think, you can never lose. And if you do, you become soulless. But it's all about input. And if you know how to ask the right questions, you can get answers at a way faster pace, and you can move policy forward way quicker. And I think that's the advantage of AI in government.
Yeah. I had actually, there was a document, I was looking for a suicide note, a happy story. I got some documents from the Maine State Police, and I knew that there was a suicide note, and it was like a 100-page PDF. I just drop it in ChatGPT, find me the suicide note, finds me the suicide note. This is what the guy wrote for a suicide note, tells me it's on page 54. I go to page 54 of the police document looking for the suicide note. There's no suicide note in here. It just totally hallucinated a suicide note. Like actually wrote out the guy's suicide note.
No way.
Total hallucination. And the craziest thing is that the guy had left a suicide note. And it was just in a photograph that they didn't give me for some reason. I had to go follow up with them and get it again. The hallucination wasn't even close to what the suicide note actually was. But that was my moment where I was like, okay, you can't, like if it'll just hallucinate a suicide note, like it'll hallucinate anything. You can't.
Yeah.
You can't trust this stuff.
No, you can't. And that's why I say it's all about the input that you give it, but you have to be human.
Yeah.
Like you have to be human. And like, that's something that AI can't do. And that's the benefit, right? It's another tool, and we have to learn how to use it.
I want to touch on another, I guess this is kind of in the news lately, thanks to Maine Wire reporter Seamus Authoug's been covering, looking at some of these Maine Department of Corrections issues. We got a letter sent to us from a woman who is an inmate at the women's prison, the state women's prison, and she alleges that she's been harassed and assaulted by Andrew Balser, who's a 6'2" man who has been moved into the women's prison. He stabbed his parents to death in cold blood, killed his dog, called the police, and told them what had happened. After becoming incarcerated, he decided he was a woman. And he's 6'2", 235 pounds, and the Mills administration and MDOC Commissioner Randy Liberty said, move on in to the women's prison. And according to the woman who sent us a letter, there's some overcrowding going on. So it's 5 women in a space and this 6'2" cold-blooded murderer. And it's causing the kind of issues, allegedly, that you would expect. Andrew is actually the guy who motivated the Department of Justice, Pam Bondi, to take away a $1.5 million grant from MDOC because that she thinks that they're violating federal law. For whatever reason, that grant was restored. The Department of Justice doesn't want to say why. MDOC's been kind of cagey about it. They just say that they're following the law. But that's just kind of like one particularly searing part of this broader cultural issue because it's happened at the state level in the corrections system. We know of 5 or 6 different men who are living in the women's prison. We know of men in the men's prison who are getting gender drugs, courtesy of John Q. taxpayer.
You and I.
Yeah. And we see this kind of thinking in our school system as well. And I know that you've been part of the Maine Girl Dads and working on the ballot referendum to try to reverse policies that force female high school athletes to compete against males. I guess, do you see this as is this a kind of like a cultural sideshow or distraction or a small battle, or does this get to something deeper in our political debates, something deeper in the problems that Maine is having?
So when I saw that reporting, I think we'd heard ancillary things about stuff like that going on in America.
Yeah.
Not necessarily in Maine. But I think wokeism is going to reverberate for a long time. I think for a lot of us focused on the boys and girls sports issue, that is something that's very real. You can feel very sympathetic for the girls who are losing their titles. Almost 1,000 girls have lost their titles nationwide to a boy. And that's something that you can feel really sympathetic for very quickly and understand what the difference is. You go to something like this, you're not necessarily feeling horrible for people in prison, but they're humans and they have rights too. And I think one of the most basic ones is to be, safe in that, as safe in that space as they possibly can be.
I mean, the Eighth Amendment.
Yeah. Yeah.
That
small thing.
Yeah. I mean, the freedom from cruel and unusual punishment. I mean, like, you're locked up because you had substance use disorder and made some bad decisions.
Doesn't mean that you should be assaulted every night in your
like,
bunk.
Like, I didn't think that the judge, the jury, or whatever did not sentence these women to be sexually assaulted by a 235-pound man.
But it's those are the places where you don't think of it right away, right? Like, you don't think that would be a problem right away, and maybe your sympathy isn't tugged on you in the same way that it would be with a girl who's in school getting their title taken away from them from a sport that they won. But that instance in particular is so egregious, and the things that that person was offering to do for other women in the prison, it's completely a joke. And the fact that the administration has allowed this to happen, not only is a violation of the women's rights in that prison, but think about the COs in there. Think about the people in leadership at the prison. They don't want that. They don't want to deal with that. I'm a county commissioner right now in Androscoggin County. Do you know how hard it is to keep a jail functional?
Yeah.
It is. Steve, people do not understand the crisis in this state when it comes to county jails, let alone our state prison system. And to be dealing with something like that it completely destroys any kind of credibility coming out of that department. Small detour on this, but I think you'll know where I'm going. Every year we go through our budget for the Androscoggin County Jail. We used to make $700,000 a year on our jail. And that would be because we sold beds to ICE, or we sold bed to the federal, whatever federal system you wanted that needed a space.
Marshals.
Yeah, whatever.
There's tons of different programs, yeah. We
used to make a bunch of money. We have about 160 beds in the Androscoggin jail. We now lose a little over $1 million because of the increased crime in Lewiston, Auburn. Alongside of that is we have to obviously provide medical care. Now, these inmates are not eligible for Medicaid. So we have to pay for that, which is fine, obviously. I asked the jail administrator at the Androscoggin County Jail, how many people in the jail right now are suffering from some sort of mental illness? And his answer to me was immediate and unequivocal, 100%.
Yeah.
100%. We are pushing on our jails and our prison system a problem that they are not equipped to deal with. And this is case in point of that. This is some sort of sickness in our system that's going to reverberate for years and years and years. And that situation was horrific when you guys did that reporting on it. And kudos to you, because it's actually being reported by mainstream media outlets now.
It's funny that, I shouldn't say funny, but the first time when I learned that Balser had been moved into the women's prison and wrote the first story about it, the Bangor Daily News hadn't covered the murder or anything, hadn't covered it at all, and then went out of their way to use a story. She is in the women's prison. She, the hateful conservative media, blah, blah, blah. It was like, you guys can't even distinguish biological reality. How are people supposed to trust you for political reality? But yeah, it is. It seems like an Eighth Amendment violation to me, but also just kind of it's shocking the degree to which some people, like responsible, normal people, will just abandon their sense of reality in order to be politically comfortable.
Yeah. And I don't even know if that's a politically comfortable stance anymore.
I outside of Maine, outside of a very cloistered, like radical fringe Maine progressive, I don't think it is either.
Yeah. And I think, and that's why the curious question to me is why I think that the policies of like peak wokeism, right? From like 2016 to, I don't know, 2023, 2024, like I think those policies are going to have lasting effects, and we're going to root them out through systems like this. You know, we have the referendum, you know, coming up in the fall for Protect Girls Sports. And that for me is really personal, not only because I have a daughter, but before I was in politics, I worked in sports. And I worked in baseball and hockey, and I got to know a lot of these athletes really well, you know, working on the business side of these sports. And these guys, they're bruisers, man, especially in hockey. And these guys are peak athletes. And when you think about it in reverse, like, would you ever, if you had a daughter, like, would you ever let your daughter play hockey with like the boys?
No.
One check and you'll break them in half. And, you know, I worked in baseball too, which is a little bit different story. But I mean, the biological reality of an elite male athlete is stark. It's stark.
Yeah, there's the danger and safety question. There's also the fairness question. I mean, you think about it now as you know, in your 30s and 40s or older, you're like, it's just high school sports. But when you're there in that moment and it's your senior year of, you know, football, basketball, whatever, cross country, whatever the sport is, it's the biggest thing you've got going. And
100%.
you learn valuable lessons about competition, fairness, hard work. And then to learn that like some guy just decided that he was going to come play in the girls' league and suddenly he gets the gold medal.
Right.
You're tearing a foundation of you know, truth and fairness out from underneath these young women.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem right, doesn't seem fair, and I think that it will be rebuked in the ballot referendum.
I think so.
I think that'll prevail, but there will be some progressives who are like the Japanese guy in the 1960s found on that island who thought World War II was still going on, you know, because I guess there's money to be made, you know, holding up the trans agenda, or they think it's a wedge issue that they can grind for political effectiveness, but it really is weird.
Yeah.
It seems like this like weird collective madness that just kind of descended over people, and it was comorbid with COVID, and people just went insane, and you had to be purged from public institutions if you thought, you know, like men were men.
Yeah.
You know, it's like a really, really weird thing.
I remember when Riley Gaines came to Maine, and I mean, this girl, elite athlete. Like, even if you watch her swim against men, like if you and I jumped in a pool,
I would drown.
I
would drown. I could drown in a bucket of water. Yeah. So
and swim against her, like we would be put to shame. Like, this person is an elite athlete, and this guy who was 400th amongst men in the in NCAA was crushing her. And I when I talked to her when she came up here, she still had pain in her eyes when she recounted that event. And this is a person who's now a public media figure. You know, she's written books. She has her own podcast. This is not a delicate woman. And she still had pain in her eyes because of what happened to her. Years and years of training just ripped away from her, not by another girl who was better than her. That you get over with and learn from over time.
Yeah.
But from something completely beyond her control. And that's the crux of what's happening with the Maine Girls Dad movement here in Maine and the Protect Girls Sports referendum. Is this is about making sure that girls have their own spaces and girls have their own awards, and that your daughter isn't going to have to hit her pillow after a tough competition and say, like, I wasn't good enough. And that's what this is about. And going back to the prison system, if I can, we have to do better than that, man. Like, we have to do better than that. And as chair, I chaired the Criminal Justice and Public Safety Committee when I was in the legislature, and we dealt with some different items at the time. I could have never imagined that this was an issue, even back in 2010, and like what we're facing right now, on top of all of our other problems with crime in the state of Maine.
It changed real quick.
Yeah.
The Chappelle's got a skit about it. I won't try to imitate, but things changed really, really fast. They asked you to believe some pretty sweeping things about human nature, and you had to believe it, really, really quick, or you were a bad person. Not just someone who disagreed about politics, but a bad person, an immoral person, if you didn't support this in our schools. But yeah, it could be that the sports referendum is the first step back toward sanity, and you'll see a large swath of the Democratic Party pretending like they never actually believed all of these things, when we'll, I think, have a pretty good memory of exactly how they carried themselves during that time. And one of the things was the culture of retribution and punishment that came up in this state. I talk about it a lot because I think it's really, really important, and it got really bad under Governor Mills. There were a lot of reasons for it. The progressive stridency, the COVID, executive, the concentration of power in the executive, the woke mob sitting at home with nothing to do. They can't go outside, so they're going to sit on their computers and bully people. But people like, Rick Savage at Sunday River Brewing Company gets his liquor license away for criticizing the governor. It should be it is your constitutional right to go on a television program and make fun of the governor of the state of Maine. You should not fear retribution from the state. Agents from the CDC coming into your bar to spy on you and make sure your plexiglass is properly distributed. Dr. Meryl Nass has her medical license taken away for criticizing the governor on talk radio. There's all these instances of people who either faced recrimination for bucking the system in the state, or have not blown the whistle on corruption because they fear recrimination. It's in law enforcement. It's in every part of the executive branch. It's in the legislature. It's every part of our state government. There are people who keep quiet about things because they're afraid of the wrath that will come down on them if they speak out and do the right thing. How do you change a culture like that that has just grown over 8 years and has really had a pernicious effect on our public health?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, and so much of it is cultural leadership style. I'll use a different example. I remember when the Republicans were in control in Augusta and Governor LePage was in office, he changed the DEP by one simple thing. All right, I talk to construction people all the time. Can't get a DEP permit. All these things. Picked up the phone. Like, it was a cultural change. Like, no more voicemails, like no more general collection mailboxes. They just picked up the phone and started talking to people and getting stuff done right away. It's the same thing on those type of whistleblower complaints. They have to believe that they can trust you, not only to hear their complaint, but to protect them through the process. I know we spent a lot of time at the beginning of this podcast talking about how we need to root out some of these bureaucrats who are just waiting us out. There's a lot of really good people in government too. Yeah. There's a lot of really good people that are there because they, fell in love with their job, whether that be at the, child development services or in HHS in the foster system. Or there's people who have a heart for what they're doing and need to be protected and listened to. Because I think sometimes as conservatives, we would go out and say, no, do the whistleblower report, go public with what you're doing, but we don't protect them through the process. Yeah. And I've seen way too much of that, that we convince them to do what they need to do. And you have to remember, some of these people, they're just a career bureaucrat, and they found something wrong that's really tugging at their heartstring and they want to go out and do the right thing. I think people in power like that need to protect people like that and let them know that it's going to be okay at the end of it. We'll help you out. There's a lot of people who just don't have the constitution that somebody like you has, or someone like I have, that can go out and be very public about something and then go to bed at night.
Yeah, The controversy is hard for a lot of people,
and that's okay. People not everybody's cut the same way. If we were all the same, we could for a really boring world.
Or really exciting. We'd all just be assholes like me.
But I think that's part of it. Is there has to be a benefit for these people to come out and like tell their stories and why they, why it's important that they came out on that specific item, and actually deal out justice when it's time, because there's a lot going on. You talk about, I said CDC, but in the foster system, but what's going on in the state with regards to children, is horrific.
Yeah,
horrific, and I know Republicans like to talk about Bill Diamond and his legacy right now. Bill Diamond was a Democrat. Bill Diamond and I served together, and he was a friend. And what he started to uncover kind of convinced him that the Democrats weren't doing their job on these things.
Yeah.
And we need people in that system to speak up and give the answers. And that's what Walk a Mile was about, right? Walk a Mile was about giving those people a voice to say, hey, this is why kids are dying. Hey, this is why the system isn't working for these kids, and we have bad outcomes for parents for families who have gone through the foster system. And so we also need to lift voices like that up, like Bill's, with Walk a Mile, because there are organizations that are pointing at these things as the problem. We just have to have the courage to fix the problem all the way, not just listen to the problem and complain about it, but actually go through the process of fixing it. And that's where I think I offer something different, is I've been through this, and we know how to fix these problems.
So Bill Diamond and Senator Jeff Timberlake, their solution was to spin off the Department of, basically the Child Welfare Agency, make it a cabinet level agency, so it had a higher level of focus, make it its own thing, a unique agency. For whatever reason, Governor Mills, looked at Bill and said no. Mm-hmm. And there was a woman who had a letter of no confidence come out, who was a supervisor in that department, and Governor Mills stood by her. Why is that? Why are they so? If you criticize a government department, why do they feel like you've insulted their character or their dog? It's like this weird thing.
Well, I think it's the big difference between Democrats and Republicans. Democrats believe in the state. They love the state. And if you criticize that, you're criticizing a piece of them. And so I think that that's an element of it, is you're criticizing something that's very dear and important to them. But you mentioned, moving OCF out of HHS and give it its own focus. Yes, you have to do that. I know I've heard some people say that we should move it out and move it under the Department of Public Safety. I think that's a mistake too. They're not prepared for that. They're not prepared for it. You have to move it out and give it its own focus. Steve, we've had almost 200 kids die.
Yeah.
Like, if we're not protecting, government is built for, in my opinion, a very few reasons. And one of them is to protect the most vulnerable. And the fact that we've had that many kids die under state watch of some sort, and people like to say, oh, it's in the foster families. Well, maybe some of it's in the foster families, but it's also that some of these state workers aren't doing the reporting that they need to do and seeing obvious red flags. Like, you have to give it its proper focus, because if we cannot do that very base level protection for the most vulnerable, for children, then what good is anything else that we're doing?
Suing ExxonMobil.
Yeah, right.
That's the conundrum for me, that a state government with all of the resources it can marshal to protect a couple hundred children who are in this shit situation, which 90% of the time revolves drug addiction, mental health issues, other issues where our social safety net is also failing. But the same state that can't effectively protect children or reform that society or even have a conversation about what needs to be done to fix that thinks that it's going to stop the ocean from rising.
I make the same parallel in my own mind. It's crazy.
It's like
you people think you're going to change the weather, but you can't bring little Johnny out of a dangerous situation. It's wild.
And
it's wild.
And just the amount of money that we've spent on Medicaid, we started talking about Medicaid personal care services, paying new Mainers to take care of their new Mainer family members with the tasks of daily living. It's hundreds of millions of dollars.
Yeah.
That money couldn't be put to OCF to have a little bit of like a better child welfare system. We spent $30 million on a piece of software through Deloitte that everyone at the Department of Health and Human Services says has probably contributed to the deaths of children because it's the caseworkers are spending all their time typing into the program.
Yeah, the Katahdin program, the Katahdin system. Yes, that's part of the problem that I see is like the very basic services of like taking care of children, taking care of the people who have been here generationally. Like I go talk about old people for a minute. Like my grandmother, we were, me and my sister, my mom passed away. My mom was the only child. My sister and I were kind of the caretakers for my grandmother. And when she went through a pretty steep health decline, it was like very quick, very fast. And we were ready, like we were trying to figure out like, what are we going to do? Like I have a 3-year-old at home. My sister is back and forth from Florida for her own reasons. It was basically, she had to move in with us or we had to find her a place to go. We couldn't find her a place to go, man. Like we couldn't find her a place to go. And the private pay was $10,000 a month. I can't afford that. Like, I mean, we somehow are able to fund all of these new Mainers taking care of new Mainers, right? But like my grandmother who lived in Maine her entire life, who was the child of Italian immigrants, by the way, like lived in Maine, contributed her whole life, drove school bus for the Lisbon School Department. I can't find her a place to live for 6 months because we don't have the services for her. Like that's the stuff for me that is really hard. It's really hard for me to understand that, especially in a state like Maine where it doesn't the population doesn't fluctuate very much. People tend to stay here for a long time, and I feel like all we're doing is funding everybody else. And there's a lot of taxpayers who are asking the question, "What am I paying for? What am I paying for?" Like the town can't bring your trash out anymore. Like you can't get your trash picked up anymore, but my property taxes went through the roof.
And for a lot of people in northern Maine, if you have a heart attack,
you can't get to a hospital.
Ambulance might not be able to come.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. There's no place that will deliver a child.
Yep.
I mean, we talked about the budgets skyrocketing from, I forget even what the last biennial budget was under LePage, but we're up to now $13 billion. And what's gotten better?
Yeah. That's the question that I think, in one of the initial questions you asked me was like, is this a pivotal election? I find that more and more people are asking. It's not necessarily that people care about the taxes that they pay, which I think they do care very much, but I don't think that's the core of it. It's what am I getting for it? Yeah. And the answer continually more and more is I don't know or nothing. And, when you have situations like my grandmother, you have situations where, your kid's not going to the school. You can't get trash pickup. The transfer station isn't even open half the time to go bring your trash. Like all of these small things that government's supposed to take care of aren't getting taken care of, yet you continue to get taxed. And people that just come in here get the welcome mat rolled out for them. That's where I think you're losing people. And I think that's the question that a lot of people are asking.
And do you think that's a general election message that will be persuasive? Obviously winning the Republican primary is one thing, but if you want to implement the policies you're talking about, you have to win the general election. What do you think, I guess, what is your message and how do you plan to win in a general election environment when, Maine, just by the numbers, it's not even really a purple state. It's it's purplish blue.
Right.
And not everybody in Maine is a Christian or an evangelical Christian.
Yep.
So what is your approach to winning in a general election when you're going to need the votes of people who maybe 5 or 6 years ago, they voted for Janet Mills. 5 or 6 years ago, they voted for an independent candidate, or, they might have at one point in time thought, that the trans thing was something that just had to be tolerated, but now their mind's kind of been changed by the evidence. Like, how do you approach mass communication with those people and voter outreach with people who aren't necessarily Republican primary voters?
I think it's message discipline, first of all. I think it's not getting distracted on every single item that comes across the pike, but you have to solve the problems of the people where they're at. And I think what we're seeing in this election is like, it's too expensive to live. And the message that we're going to bring to people is that for the past 8 years, the Democrats have given you carte blanche. They have had carte blanche to do whatever they want. And now you see it reflected in your mortgage payment. You see it reflected in your energy bill, your grocery bill, your oil bill. You see it reflected in all of these places. Your kids go to school and it's constantly disrupted by kids who shouldn't be in the classroom. It's constantly disrupted by social issues that you don't want any part of. Give us a chance to govern, and here is what we will do. And I think, one of the things that I talk about all the time is, there's a national component to some of these things, of course. But when you look at the issues that we've championed, there's no reason that Maine should be one of the top 5 most expensive places for a power bill. There's no reason for that. The reason for it is because we've decided to rip up every agricultural field and put up a solar panel.
It was a choice.
It was a choice.
Yeah, it was a choice.
We chose to do it. There's a reason that people are coming here from out of state and buying homes. It's because we've made it easy for them to do it, and we're not charging them appropriately for that pleasure. There's a reason that all of these things, like, talk about food, right? When you replace agricultural land with solar panels, it gives you a lot less place to grow food or to raise cattle. And so we've made our food more expensive and from further away, by the way. All of these things are a choice that Democrats made for you. And if we can articulate that message, I think we can turn this stuff around pretty quickly.
Who do you think is going to win the Democratic primary?
I think it's going to be Nirav Shah.
I'm persuaded by that.
I do.
Yeah.
I do. A guy who's been here for 3 or 4 years collectively. And, oh man.
I mean, his resume is basically like a Legionnaire's outbreak.
I know.
And then, and then coming to Maine.
I know some legislators that served, some Republican legislators that were in the Illinois legislature when all that happened.
Yeah.
And this guy ran out of there bipartisanly.
Mm-hmm.
And
just such a classic Governor Mills hire.
Yeah, I know.
Right? So, Nirav, we see your previous experience. Tell us how this Legionnaire's outbreak
How
went.
much do you want?
Yeah.
Come on.
$250,000? Right. Is that enough for you? Yeah, I mean, I think it will be. Especially because of the ranked choice dynamic.
Yeah.
And everything that they did to promote COVID authoritarianism made him the face of, like, the trustworthy face for all these blue boomers who are going to be deciding the primary.
Yeah.
If he properly genuflects to the migrant industrial complex, I think that he has a chance.
I love that term.
I think he has a chance. Mm-hmm. But he'll also, I think he'll be the number 2 vote for all of the Democrats, because otherwise they'd be racist.
Yeah. Well,
right?
yeah, you have to.
Yeah.
It's a loyalty
kind of have to.
And I think, you're going to get, he may be the first, he may come out first in the first round and then get everybody's second round choices. I think that might be how it could play out.
Mm-hmm.
And then, you have a whole series of, have a couple of independents in the race. And that's why I think it's important that Republicans offer something different. And when you have the makeup that you're going to have on the Democrat side, if I'm right, we need to put forward something different. And I think that, and I believe that I'm that candidate. A forward-facing millennial, father of one, husband that understands what people are going through in all of these areas of life. I think that's what we need, and I'm happy to be offering it in this primary.
If people want to find you on social media, and I know you do a podcast as well, a bunch of places to find you online. Where can they go to find out more?
Go masonformaine.com. All the socials are linked there. Also, the YouTube channel is at The Garrett Mason Show. And we'll go on there and outline policy positions, talk about everything going on in the race. And I always love doing that. So, yeah.
That's great. So you got great domains. Steve Robinson is more of a common name. So there's like some Lutheran minister in Louisiana has steverobinson.com.
Mine's a blues singer in New Brunswick.
Oh.
So I can't get GarrettMason.com because
Okay,
there's a blues singer in New Brunswick. So
another thing the boomers ruined. The assignment of internet domains. But Garrett Mason, thank you very much for joining us on the Robinson Report.
Thank you for having me.